And I went, they are. So, welcome in everyone, which is to say at least Abbe. So, what we're going to do, first things first of course, got to give Abbe lucky number 16. I don't know why I say lucky before every time. I started saying that 12 was like a little allusion to lucky 13, and then now I just say every time we get an Abbe redeem. Yeah, always appreciate you showing up, Abbe. You are a constant in my life, which I do appreciate. Yeah. Yeah, that's done. What else? No new followers since last week, so we don't have any people to thank on that end. In which case, I guess the next thing to move on to is the badges. Those of you who have eagle eyes might have noticed that the badge little board that I have up is still out, which I generally add if there's not a badge to have. So, as you might have seen in my little messages that I sent out, today is likely going to be the end of the M.R. James ghost stories. I thought we had a couple more streams after them because we got 4, but looking at them, the last ones are pretty short, so I suspect we're going to get through all of them today. And since they have been such a comfort and pleasure to me, I thought I would do a little special badge for them. As always, we'll show the sub badge first because I don't expect anyone to get that, but we have a little sad black ghost. And for everyone who I do expect, or the one that I do expect everyone to get, a little follow-up or the watch time badge, we've got an happy ghost. Because, you know, something for the ghost stories. Seem fitting. But yeah. What else have we got to say then? Oh yeah, something else I should probably be doing is I do have a new song out today, which I sort of did last minute, so it's not super polished. But yesterday, while I was in Hang Out in Plague stream, which I sometimes do, someone mentioned that they'd like to hear me cover a specific song, specifically Joanna from Sweeney Todd the musical, and it's a very short one. And I was seized by a creative impulse that's out today. So if you're one of the few people who follows my music, you can feel free to give that a look as well. But yeah. I'm taking a moment here because the woods is making a bit of a different sound today. I'm really enjoying these, which is sort of throwing me off my thing. It just sort of makes me want to sort of listen, just hang around and chill out and listen to it. But that's not what we're here for, is it? So. What are we talking about? We're talking about cursed objects. But since we're about to finish the M.R. Jameses, maybe we should talk about some of the ones in his stories, since they are sort of a typical theme of his. There's a few that I think are particularly notable, so I'll cover them briefly. If you haven't heard any of the previous M.R. Jameses, spoilers for those. If you don't want to hear them, you can look away or mute me for 7 minutes. I'll be coming back around 10 past. So yeah, if you don't mind, we'll cover a few of them. So there's a couple of them that stick out in my mind from his stories. Well, I should say 3 of them that really stick out. The first is the whistle from Whistle and I Come My Lad, which was an interesting one. It was something about summoning the wind, and he found this whistle in like an abandoned Templar priory, and had the strange inscription on it. I think the thing that sticks out to me about it is that it is such a subtle thing, right? You find the whistle and you blow it. It sort of makes sense logically, but it's the sort of thing that leads you astray in an horror story. You find an object and you don't research it properly. But realistically, if you found an old whistle, and presuming you're not a germaphobe, probably you'd blow it, right? You'd want to sound it. And then the little, the wind that goes, the sort of thing that was only in the form of the sheets, really struck me as horrible. The other one is from Mr. Humphreys and his errands, which I think I'll save that one as an highlight if you're interested. It's the orb in the centre of the maze. Really sort of captured my interest. It was really good with the symbolism and the Latin and all these little details about it, giving it some sort of depth and control. And what really gets me is that you're still not really exactly sure what it is. Like, obviously there's something to it, some sort of tie to the plan of the maze and the person who it was made from, but it is this mysterious object, so heavy with symbolic meaning, this sort of depth there, all tied into the sort of greater superstructure of the maze. Makes for an interesting one. And then last is the pattern from the journals or the diary of Mr. Pointer. The sort of cloth pattern that is probably the most mysterious one of them all because there's so little information on it. It's not because apparently it was originally woven from the fellow's hair, who was the sort of original victim of it. But the pattern in the book wasn't woven from it, and especially not the final curtains, right? They were just, or maybe the pattern in the book was, but the patterns made by the or reproduced by the dealer who it's taken to are just normal, fabric. It's the whole idea of how something can symbolise something greater, The idea behind a thing can become the thing. The pattern is the meaningful thing. This idea that, across all of time and space there are images or specific arrangements of things that can come to mean a specific thing and then change with that thing into, or will become something, Stick with me. It sticks with me. It's the thing that underlines all of it, I think. You have this idea of what it is to be a magical object. And I mean that's sort of right at the heart of it. A shape in the world that affects things and changes them. In fact, that's something that all of the three of the things I mentioned have in common, isn't it? The shape of the maze, the shape of the pattern, and even the little inscription on the whistle. All of them bend the world to their will. They alter things. I think that's the thing that gets me about magic, really. The idea that by control, by understanding, you can reshape the nature of things. The laws that govern the world. It's a very compelling idea. Still, not for me to know, I suppose, not for me to know. What else is there to say then? I mean, there are a few other standouts. The field glasses from the last one too were particularly notable and grim, mostly because we go into their construction a bit more. And there's the haunted dollhouse and the mezzotint. All these things that sort of carry impressions of the past. It's another thing that sort of runs through a lot of James's cursed objects, which I guess is fitting, right? The whole idea of an haunting, a ghost story, the lingering traces of that was. Something so meaningful, so significant that it writes itself on the world. Another form of magic. I find that one somewhat less compelling. I mean, there's something to it as well, I suppose. An idea that things always matter. But it feels more random. That's like a thing you can harness and more like a thing that happens, doesn't it? Of course, we see things that sort of come to us, or people that come to us sort of a sticky end when they do try and harness it. Strange, really. Of course, maybe they're just two different sides of the same thing. A shape in the world that changes how things work. It's fundamental as a screw. If only you could understand it. If only. Still, I think that's about enough reminiscing for now. I'll go do my little preamble over by the books themselves and then we'll go from there, I suppose. So, from today we're going to be starting with There Was a Man Dwelt by a Churchyard, which is the first of 4 that we're planning to get through today. As always, if while I'm going through these you happen to miss something, either because I've stumbled over it, or gone too quickly, there's been a bit of interference, any other reason, and you need me to go back over something, let me know and I'm happy to do so. If you have comments, questions, thoughts, let me know and I'm happy to have a word on them. Like I said, today's stories are all pretty short, so the plan is just to go over them at the end of each one, so I'll give them their time then. And I suspect we'll be going for maybe an hour and a half today, but we'll see how it all comes together. Other than that, unless anyone has any particular thoughts or questions they'd like before I begin, and I suppose without any further ado, quick drink of water. And I have to ask you. Well, fair enough then, Abby. I'll have another drink of water. Cheers. But where was I? Yes. Are you sitting comfortably? Well then, I'll begin. There was a man dwelt by a churchyard. This, you know, is the beginning of the story about sprites and goblins, which Mammalus, the best child in Shakespeare, would tell to his mother, the Queen, and the court ladies when the King come in with his guards and hurried her off to prison. There is no more of the story. Mammalus died soon after without having a chance of finishing it. Now what were it going to have been? Shakespeare knew, no doubt. And I will be bold to say that I do. It were not going to be a new story. It were going to be one which you have most likely heard, and even told. Everybody may say in what frame he likes best. This is mine. There was a man dwelt by a churchyard. His house had a lower story of stone, and an upper one of timber. The front window looked out on the street, and the back ones on the churchyard. It had once belonged to the parish priest, but, this were in Queen Elizabeth's days, the priest were a married man and wanted more room. Besides, his wife disliked seeing the churchyard at night out her bedroom window. She said she saw, but never mind what she said. Anyhow, she gave her husband no peace till he agreed to move into a larger house in the village street, and the old one was taken by John Paul, who were a widower, and lived there alone. He was an elderly man and kept very much to himself, and people said he was something of a miser. It was very likely true. He was morbid in other ways, certainly. In those days, it was common to bury people at night and by torchlight. And it was noticed that whenever a funeral was towards, John Paul were always at his window, either on the ground floor or upstairs, according as he could get the better view from one or the other. There came a night when an old woman would be buried. She was fairly well to do, but she was not liked in the place. The usual things were said of her, that she was no Christian, and that on such nights as Midsummer Eve and All Hallows, she was not to be found in her house. She was red-eyed and dreadful to look at, and no beggar ever knocked at her door. Yet when she died, she left a purse of money to the church. There was no storm on the night of her burial. It was fair and calm. But there was some difficulty about getting bearers, men to carry the torches, in spite of the fact that she had left larger fees than common for such as did the work. She was buried in Walham without a coffin. No one were there but those that were actually needed, and John Paul watching from his window. Just before the grave were filled in, the parson stooped down and cast something upon the body, something that clinked. And in a low voice he said words that sounded like, "Thy money perish with thee." And then he walked quickly away, and so did the other men, leaving only one torchbearer to light the sexton and his boy while they shovelled the earth in. They made no very neat job of it, and next day, which was Sunday, the churchgoers was rather sharp with the sexton, saying it was the untidiest grave in the yard. And indeed, when he come to look at it himself, he thought it was worse than he had left it. Meanwhile, John Paul went about with a curious air, half exulting as it were, and half nervous. More than once he spent an evening at the inn, which was clean contrary to his usual habit, and of those who fell into talk with him there, he hinted that he had come into a little bit of money, and were looking out at a somewhat better house. "Well, I don't wonder," said the smith one night. "I shouldn't care for that place of yours. I should be fancying things all night." The landlord asked him what sort of things. "Well, maybe somebody climbing up the chamber window, or the like of that," said the smith. "I don't know. Our mother Wilkins that was buried a week ago today, eh?" "Come, I think you might consider a person's feelings," said the landlord. "It ain't so pleasant for Master Paul, is it now?" "Master Paul don't mind," said the smith. "He's been there long enough to know I only says it wouldn't be my choice. But with the passing bell, and the torches when there's burial, and all them graves laying so quiet when there's no one about, only they say there's lights. Don't you never see no lights, Mr. Paul?" "No, I don't never see no lights," said Master Paul sulkily, and called for another drink, and went home late. That night, as he lay in his bed upstairs, a moaning wind began to play about the house, and he could not go to sleep. He got up and crossed the room to a little cupboard in the wall. He took out of it something that clinked, and put it in the breast of his bedgown. Then he went to the window and looked out into the churchyard. Have you ever seen an old brass in a church, with the figure of a person in a shroud? It is bunched together at the top of the head in a curious way. Something like that was sticking up out of the earth in a spot of the churchyard which John Paul knew very well. He darted into his bed and lay there, very still indeed. Presently, something made a very faint rattling at the easement. With a dreadful reluctance, John Paul turned his eyes that way. Alas! Between him and the moonlight was a black outline of a curious hunched head. Then there were a figure in the room. Dry earth rattled on the floor. A low, cracked voice said, "Where is it?" And steps went hither and thither, faltering steps, as of one walking with difficulty. It could be seen, now and again, peering into corners, stooping to look under chairs. Finally it could be heard fumbling at the door of the cupboard in the wall, throwing them open. There was scratching of long nails on the empty shelves. The figure whipped round, stood for an instant at the side of the bed, raised its arm, with an hoarse scream of, "You've got it!" At this point, H.R.H. Prince Mamilius, who would, I think, have made the story a good deal shorter than this, flung himself with a loud yell upon the youngest of the court ladies present, who responded with an equally piercing cry. They were instantly seized upon by Her Majesty Queen Hermione, who, repressing an inclination to laugh, shook and slapped him very severely. Much flushed, and rather inclined to cry, he were about to be sent to bed. But on the intercession of his victim, who had now recovered from the shock, he was eventually permitted to remain until his usual hour for retiring, by which time he too had so far recovered as to assert, in bidding good night to the company, that he knew another story quite 3 times as dreadful as that one, and would tell it the first opportunity that offered. That's the end of There Was a Man Dwelt by a Churchyard. And I'm sort of inclined to agree actually with the initial conclusion of M.R. James. It is quite a familiar story, because we've read what I would say is probably a version of it, specifically the Mark Twain story. Well, a Mark Twain story, specifically in this little essay, How to Tell a Story. He has a version of this, though it's written in quite an unpleasant little vernacular that makes it very difficult to read. But it's very much the same sort of thing, where it ends with you making a loud accusation in the voice of an undead person and then jumping on someone. It's a good little story too. Of course, you sort of lack the ability to jump on people, unfortunately, where I am, but it is a story very much written to be read aloud, which I appreciate. But yeah, I don't think there's too much else to say from it, other than, grave robbing is a pretty standard taboo, and if you're not prepared to deal with some ghosts, maybe don't do it. Yeah. That being said, we'll press on the next one, shall we? Oh no, first I'll have a quick drink of water. But yeah, that one was only about 5 pages, so I said these ones are quite short. This next one is only an hour longer, but it is slightly longer. And then the third one is the longest of them all. The last one's about as short again, so just to give you some idea of how this is going to be playing out. But yeah, our next one. After dark in the playing fields. The hour were late, and the night were fair. I had halted not far from Sheep's Bridge, when thinking about the stillness, only broken by the sound of the weir, when a loud tremulous hoot just above me made me jump. It is always annoying to be startled, but I have a calmness for owls. This one were evidently very near. I looked about for it. There it were, sitting plumply on a branch about 12 feet up. I pointed my stick at it, and I said, "Was that you?" "Drop it," said the owl. "I know it ain't only a stick, but I don't like it. Yes, of course it were me. Who do you suppose it would be if it were?" We'll take as read the sentences about my surprise. I lowered the stick. "Well," said the owl, "what about it? If you come out here of a midsummer evening like what this is, what do you expect?" "I beg your pardon," I said. "I should have remembered. May I say that I think myself very lucky to have met you tonight? Hope you have time for a little talk." "Well," said the owl ungraciously, "I don't know as it matters so particularly tonight. I've had my supper as it happens, and if you ain't too long over it, Suddenly it broke into a loud scream, flapped its wings furiously, bent forward, and clutched its perch tightly, continuing to scream. Plainly, something were pulling hard at it from behind. The strain relaxed abruptly, the owl nearly fell over, then whipped around, ruffling up all over, and made a vicious dab at something unseen by me. "Oh, I am sorry," said a small, clear voice in a solicitous tone. I made sure it was loose. "I do hope I didn't hurt you." "Didn't hurt me," said the owl bitterly. "Of course you hurt me. The way you know it, you young infidel. That feather no more loose than... Oh, if I could get at you. Nah, I shouldn't but wonder, but you've thrown me all out of balance. Why can't you let a person sit quiet for 2 minutes at a time without you must come creeping up and where? You've done it this time anyway. I shall go straight to headquarters and..." Finding it were now addressing empty air, the owl paused. "Why, where have you got to now?" It's too bad that it is." "Dear me," I said. "I'm afraid this isn't the first time you've been annoyed in this way. May I ask exactly what happened?" "Yes, you may ask," said the owl, still looking narrowly about as it spoke. "But it'll take me till the latter end of next week to tell you. Fancy coming and pulling out anyone's tail feather. Hurt me something cruel, it did. And for what, I should like to know. Answer me that. Where's the reason of it?" All that occurred to me with a murmur, "A camorous owl at nightly youths and wonders at our quaint spirits." I hardly thought the point would be taken, but the owl said sharply, "What's that? Yes, you needn't to repeat it. I heard you. And I tell you what's at the bottom of it, and you mark my words." He bent towards me and whispered with many nods of his round heads, "Pride. Standoffishness, that's what it is. Come not near our fairy queen." This in a tone of bitter contempt. "Oh dear no, I ain't good enough for the likes of them. Us it's been noted time out of mind for the best singers in the fields. Now ain't that so?" "Well," I said doubtfully enough, "I'd like to hear you very much. You know, some people think a lot of thrushes and nightingales and so on. You must have heard that, haven't you? And then perhaps, of course I don't know, perhaps your style of singing isn't exactly what they think suitable to accompany their dancing, eh?" "I should kindly hope not," said the owl, drawing itself up. "Our families never give in to dancing, nor never won't neither. Well, whatever you think of," it went on with a rising temper, "a petty thing it would be for me to set their hiccuping at them." He stopped and looked cautiously all around it, and up and down, and then continued in a louder voice, "Them little ladies and gentlemen. If it ain't suitable for them, I'm very sure it ain't suitable for me, and," temper rising again, "they expect me now to say a word, just 'cause they're dancing and often carrying on with their foolishness. They're very much mistook, and so I tell 'em." From what had passed before, I were afraid this were an imprudent line to take, and I were right. Hardly had the owl given its last emphatic nod, when 4 small slim forms dropped from a bough above, and in a twinkling some sort of grass rope were thrown round the body of the unhappy bird, and were borne off through the air, loudly protesting in the direction of Feller's Pond. Splashes and gurgles and shrieks of unfeeling laughter were heard as I hurried up. Something darted away over my head, and as I stood peering over the bank of the pond, which were all in commotion, a very angry and dishevelled owl scrambled heavily up the bank, and, stopping near my feet, shook itself and flapped and hissed for several minutes without saying anything I should care to repeat. Glaring at me, it eventually said, and the grim suppressed rage in its voice was such that I hastily drew back a step or two. "Hear that? Said they were very sorry, but they'd mistook me for a duck. If they ain't enough to make someone go regular distracted in their mind, I dare everything to flinders from Mars round." So carried away with it by passion, it begun the process at once by rooting up a large beakful of grass, which, alas, I got into its throat, and the choking that resulted made me really afraid that it would break a vessel. But the paroxysm were mastered, and the owl sat up, winking and breathless, but intact. Some expression of sympathy seemed to be required. Yet I was chary of offending it, for in its present state of mind I thought the bird might interpret the best meant phrase as a fresh insult. So we stood, looking at each other without speech for a very awkward minute, and then come a diversion. First, a thin voice of the pavilion clock, and deeper sound from the castle quadrangle, then Lupton's tower, drowned the curfew tower by its nearness. "What's that?" said the owl suddenly and hoarsely. "Midnight, I should think," said I, and had recourse to my watch. "Midnight?" cried the owl, evidently much startled. "And me too wet to fly hard. Here, you pick me up and put me in the tree. Don't, I'll climb up your leg, and you won't ask me to do that twice. Quick now." I obeyed. "Which tree do you want?" "Why, my tree, to be sure. Oh, there." He nodded towards the ball. "All right. Bad Calx tree, you mean?" I said, beginning to run in that direction. "I should know what silly names you call it. The one what you has like a door to it. Go faster, they'll be coming in another minute." "Oh, what's the matter?" I asked, as I ran, clutching the wet creature, and much afraid of stumbling and coming over with it in the long grass. "You'll see fast enough," said the selfish bird. "You just let me get up on the tree, I shall be all right." And I suppose it were, for it scrabbled very quickly up the trunk with its wings spread, and disappeared in an hollow without a word of thanks. I looked round, not very comfortably. The curfew tower was still playing St. David's tune, and the little charm that follows, for a third and last time. But the other bells had finished what they had to say, and now there was silence, and again the restless change in wear were the only thing that broke. No, that emphasised it. Why had the owl been so anxious to get into Ireland? That, of course, was what now exercised me. Whatever and whoever were coming, I was sure that this were no time for me to cross the open field. I should do best to dissemble my presence by staying on the darker side of the tree. And that is what I did. All this took place some years ago, before summertime come in. I do sometimes go into the playing field at night still, but I come in before true midnight, and I find I do not like a crowd after dark. For example, at the 4th of June fireworks. You see, no, you do not see, but I see, such curious faces, and the people to whom they belong flit about so oddly, often at your elbow when you least expect it, and looking close into your face, as if they were searching for someone, who may be thankful, I think, if they do not find them. Where do they come from? Where? Some, I think, out on the water, and some out of the ground. They look like that. I'm sure it's best to take no notice of them, and not to touch them. Yes, I certainly prefer the daylight population of the playing field to that which comes there after dark. That's the end of After Dark in the playing field. That's an odd one. That's not a ghost story at all. That's a fairy story. Really kind of took me there. You have a talking owl right out the gate. And of course some fair folk. And Queen Titania mentioned explicitly, who is, at least in Shakespeare's canon, the Queen of the Fairies. Queen of Summer. That's an odd one. It strikes me especially because that is That is a remarkably significant story in like its folkloric origins. But it requires a little bit of explaining, so let me have a quick drink of water before I get into it. So first things first, the owl itself isn't actually that significant in this story. I mean, obviously it's sort of the framing device and the sort of central character, but the role it plays isn't that big a one, other than by asking our man to get it back to the tree right sharpish and offending certain of the fair folk who make her presence known. And indeed, the horror of this story doesn't seem apparent to anyone who's probably not versed in the folklore of the British Isles, but it's pretty notable. So obviously there's some conflict with the fair folk, which you'd never want. It's never a wise man who offends them, but the really scary thing about this is his mention of the folks that he sees after dark in the playing field. Now obviously this playing field is some sort of hub of activity of the fair folk, which, you know, is not necessarily a bad thing, although you can make it a treacherous place to wander, which being a playing field probably isn't ideal. What's troubling is the fact that he sees them. Now obviously sometimes, you know, folk can see the fair folk. It's not unheard of. They appear to people in stories, they show up. It's known that happens. And they can make themselves seem plain as they want to. But the thing is, they don't show themselves to him. They don't interact with him when he sees them. He just sees them. And the reason that that's troubling is because it implies that he has what is called the sight. Now you might be familiar with the sight. It comes up a fair bit in some fiction, at least some variation of it. And there's, you know, it's called various things, the second sight, the sixth sense, that sort of thing. But in the old stories, it's a singular gift. And what it is that it allows a person to pierce through the glamours of the fae, which is to say, they see them even when they want to move unseen, which is most of the time. And the reason that it's a scary thing to have is that in all stories about it, the fae do not like folk who have the sight. They like to move unseen, and so folk who can see them generally have their displeasure. And this can mean a few things. In the mildest case, it can mean small tricks from the minor fae, but more commonly the extremer sides of the thing, which generally end with your person possessing the sight either blinded in a rather vicious way or dead. And he doesn't really realise it, obviously. He's a little unnerved by what he can see, but he doesn't particularly notice the trouble of it. He's just unsettled. But the thing that is that the people who he sees, the things that he sees, that look like they come out of the water or out of the ground, are looking at him and looking for something or someone. They're looking into his eyes. They're trying to get the sense if he can see them. And what he doesn't realise is that if he gives sign clear enough, if he addresses them or acknowledges them too plainly, and quite likely he's in for a sticky end. Now, is that a horror story? You could argue not. You certainly have to know what is going on to really understand the grimness of it, but it's certainly not a pleasant thing to be lingering on. And of course it does reinforce one of the classic tales of, or well, parables, or not parables, morals, that's it, morals of horror stories. Namely, that it is unwise to go out walking after dark. That's what it is that's supposed to come about come midnight. It's not unheard of for there to be a few different things, you know, the witching hour, the devil's hour, a few different words. Could be anything really, but certainly being out so late is not a wise thing, by most accounts. Still, certainly not the most objectively horrible of the stories we've read by M.R. James, but yeah. And now that we've had our little lesson on the history of the folklore of the British Isles, I shall have another quick drink and then we'll move on to the Wailing Well, which is the longest of tonight's stories. It may stretch over the outbreak, depending. So, Are you sitting comfortably? We shall begin. In the year 19 censored, there was two members of the troop of scouts attached to a famous school, named respectively Arthur Wilcox and Stanley Judkins. They were the same age, boarded in the same house, was in the same division, and naturally was members of the same patrol. They were so much alike in appearance as to cause anxiety and trouble, and even irritation, the masters who come in contact with them. But how different were they in their inward man or boy? "You are to Arthur Wilcox," the headmaster said, looking up with a smile as the boy entered the chambers. "Why, Wilcox, there will be a deficit in the prize fund if you stay here much longer. Here, take this handsomely bound copy of the life and works of Bishop Ken, and with my hearty congratulations to yourself and your excellent parents." It was Wilcox again, whom the provost noticed as he passed through the playing fields, and, pausing for a moment, observed to the vast provost, "That lad has a remarkable brow." "Indeed, yes," said the vast provost. "It denotes either genius or water on the brain." As a scout, Wilcox secured every badge and the distinction for which he competed. The cookery badge, the map-making badge, the life-saving badge, the badge for picking up bits of newspaper, the badge for not slamming the door when leaving pupil rooms, and many others. With a life-saving badge, I may have a word to say when we come to treat of Stanley Judkins. You cannot be surprised to hear that Mr. Oak Jones added a special verse to each of his songs in commendation of Arthur Wilcox, or that the lower master burst into tears when handing him a Good Conduct Medal in its handsome claret-coloured case. The medal which had been unanimously voted to him by the whole of the third form. Unanimously, did I say? I'm wrong. There were one dissentient, Judkins, me, who said that he had excellent reason for acting as he did. He shared, it seems, a room with his major. You cannot, again, wonder that in after years after Wilcox, the first, and so far the only boy, become captain of both the school and of the Epidians, that the strain of carrying out his duties of both positions, coupled with the ordinary work of the school, was so severe, a complete rest for 6 months, followed by a voyage round the world, were pronounced as an absolute necessity by the family doctor. It would be a pleasant task to trace the steps by which he attained the giddy eminence he now occupies, but for the moment enough of Arthur Wilcox. Time presses. We must turn to a very different matter. The career of Stanley Judkins Ma. Stanley Judkins, like Arthur Wilcox, attracted the attention of the authorities in quite another fashion. It was to him that the lower master said, with no cheerful smile, "What, again, Judkins? A very little persistence in this course of conduct, my boy, and you will have cause to regret that you ever entered this academy. There, take that, and think yourself very lucky you don't get that and that." It was Judkins, again, whom the provost had cause to notice as he passed through the playing fields, when a cricket ball struck him with considerable force on the ankle, and a voice from a short way off cried, "Thank you, cut over." "I think," said the provost, pausing for a moment to rub his ankle, "that boy had better fetch his cricket ball for himself." "Indeed, yes," said the vice provost, "but if he comes within reach, I will do my best to fetch him something else." As a scout, Stanley Judkins secured no badge save those which he were able to abstract from members of other patrols. In the cookery competition, he was detected trying to introduce squibs into the Dutch oven of the next-door competitors. In the tailoring competition, he succeeded in sewing two boys together very firmly, with disastrous effect when they tried to get up. For the tidiness badge, he was disqualified because, in the midsummer school time, which chanced to be hot, he could not be dissuaded from sitting with his fingers in the ink, as he said, for coolness' sake. For one piece of paper which he picked up, he must have dropped at least 6 banana skins or orange peels. Aged women, seeing him approach him, would beg him with tears in their eyes not to carry their pails of water across the road. They knew too well what the result would inevitably be. But it were in the life-saving competition that Stanley Judkins' conduct were the most blamable and had the most far-reaching effects. The practice, as you know, were to throw a selected lower boy of suitable dimensions, fully dressed, with his hands and feet tied together, into the deepest part of the Cuckoo Weir, and the time the scout whose turn it were to rescue him. On every occasion when he entered for this competition, Stanley Judkins was seized at the critical moment with a severe fit of cramp, which caused him to roll on the ground and utter alarming cries. This naturally distracted the attention of those present from the boy in the water, and had it not been for the presence of Arthur Wilcox, the death roll would have been an heavy one. As it were, a lower master found it necessary to take a firm line, and say that the competition must be discontinued. It were in vain that Mr. Beasley Robinson represented to him that in 5 competitions only 4 lower boys had actually succumbed. The lower master said that he would be the last to interfere in any way with the work of the scouts, but that 3 of these boys had been valued members of his choir, and both he and Dr. Lay felt the inconvenience caused by the losses outweighed the advantages of the competitions. Besides, the correspondence with the parents of these boys had become annoying and even distressing. They were no longer satisfied with the printed form, which he were in the habit of sending out, and more than one of them had actually visited Eton and taken up so much of his valuable time with complaints. So the life-saving competition is now a thing of the past. In short, Stanley Judkins were no credit to the scouts, and there were talk on more than one occasion of informing him that his services was no longer required. This course was strongly advocated for by Mr. Lambert, but in the end, milder counsels prevailed, and it was decided to give him another chance. So it is that we find him at the beginning of the midsummer holiday of 19 blank, at the Scouts' camp in the beautiful district of W, or X, in the country of D, or 1. It was a lovely morning, and Stanley Judkins and 1 or 2 of his friends, for he still had friends, lay basking on the top of the down. Stanley was lying on his stomach, with his chin propped on his hands, staring into the distance. "I wonder what that place is," he said. "Which place?" said one of the others. "That sort of clump in the middle of the field down there." "Oh, Ad, how should I know what it is?" "What do you want to know for?" said another. "I don't know, like the look of it." "What's it called? Nobody got a map?" said Stanley. "Call yourselves scouts." "Here's a map all right," said Wilfred Pipsqueak, ever resourceful. "And there's the place marked on it. It's inside the Red Wing. You can't go there." "Ah, who cares about a red ring?" said Stanley. "It's got no name on your silly map." "Well, you can ask this old chap what it's called if you're so keen to find out." This old chap were an old shepherd who had come up and was standing behind them. "Good morning, young gents," he said. "You got a fine day for your dawns, don't you?" "Yes, thank you," said Algernon de Montmorency, with native politeness. "And can you tell us what that clump over there is called? What's that thing inside of it?" "Of course I can tell you," said the shepherd. "That's Wailing Well, laddies. You ain't got no call to worry about that." "Is it a well in there?" said Algernon. "Who uses it?" The shepherd laughed. "Bless ya," he said. "There ain't a man that's sheep in these parts uses Wailing Well. There haven't done all the years we lived here." "Well, there'll be a record broken a day then," said Stanley Judkins, "because I shall go and get some water out of it for tea." "Sakes alive, young gentleman," said the shepherd in a startled voice. "Don't you get to talking that way? Why ain't your master giving notice not to go by there? They ought to have done." "Yes, they have," said Wilfred Pipsqueak. "Shut up, you ass," said Stanley Judkins. "What's the matter with it? Isn't the water good? Anyhow, if it were boiled, it'd be all right." "I don't know as there's much wrong with the water," said the shepherd. "All I know is my old dog wouldn't go through that field, let alone me or anyone else that's got a morsel of brains in their heads." "More fool them," said Stanley Judkins, and once rudely and ungrammatically. "Whoever took any harm going there?" he added. "3 women and a man," said the shepherd gravely. "Now just you listen to me. I know these here parts, and you don't, and I can tell you this much. For these 10 years last past, there ain't been a sheep fed in that field, not a crop raised of it, and it's good land too. You can pretty well say from here what state it's got into, with brambles and suckers and trash all kind of it. You've got a glass, young gentleman," he said to Wilfred Pipsqueak. "You can tell with that, anyway." "Yes," said Wilfred, "but I see there's tracks in it. Someone must go through it sometimes." "Tracks?" said the shepherd. "I believe you. 4 tracks. 3 women and a man." "What do you mean, 3 women and a man?" said Stanley, turning over the first time and looking at the shepherd. He had been talking with his back to him till this moment. He was an ill-mannered boy. "Man, who what I says? 3 women and a man." "Who are they?" asked Algernon. "Why do they go there?" "There's some, but I could tell you what they was," said the shepherds. "But afore my time they come by our end. And why they goes there still is more than children and men can tell. Said I've heard they was all barons when they were alive." "By George, what a rum thing," said Algernon, and Wilfred muttered. Stanley was scornful and bitter. "Well, you don't mean they're debtors. What rat? Used to be a lot of fools to believe that. Who there's seen them, I'd like to know?" "I seen them, young gentleman," said the shepherd. "Seen them from near on by that bit of down. My old dog, he could speak. He'd tell you I'd have seen them the same time. At 4 o'clock of the day it were, much such a day as. I seen them, each one of them, come peering out the bushes, and stand up and work their way, slow by them tracks, to all the trees in the middle, where the well is." "And what were they like? Do tell us," said Algernon and Wilfred eagerly. "Rag and bone, young gentleman. All 4 of them, floating in rags and white bones. Seemed to me I could hear them clacking as they got along. Very slow they went, looking from side to side." "What were their faces like? Could you see?" "Hadn't much to call faces," said the shepherd. "But I could seem to see as they had teeth." "Law," said Wilfred. "What'd they do when they got to the trees?" "I can't tell you that, sir," said the shepherd. "I went for staying in that place. And if I had been, I was bound to look at my old dog. He'd gone. Such a thing he ne'er done afore, as leave me. But gone he had. When I come up with him in the end, here in that state, he didn't know me, or fit to fly in my throat. But I kept talking to him, and after a bit he remembered my voice, and come creeping up like a child asking pardon. Ne'er want to see him like that again, nor yet no other dog." The dog, who had come up while making friends all round, looked up at his master, and expressed agreement with what he was saying very fully. The boys pondered for some moments on what they had heard, after which Wilfred said, "And why is it called Wailing Well? If you was round there at dusk of a winter's evening, you wouldn't ask to tell why," is all the shepherd said. "Well, I don't believe a word of it," said Stanley Judkins, "and I'll go there next chance I get. Lord, if I don't." "And you won't be ruled by me," said the shepherd, "nor by your masters as warn you off. Come now, young gentleman, you don't want for sense, I should say. What should I want telling you a pack of lies? Ain't sixpence to me anyone going in that field. I wouldn't like to see a young chap snuffed over, or snuffed out like in his prime." "I expect there's a lot more than sixpence to you," said Stanley. "I expect you've got a whiskey still or something in there, and want to keep the other people away. Rat, I call it. Go on back, you boys." So they all turned away. The 2 others said, "Good evening," and "Thank you," to the shepherd, but Stanley said nothing. The shepherd shrugged his shoulders and stood where he were, looking after him rather sadly. On his way back to the camp, there was a great argument about it all, and Stanley was told, as plainly as he could be told, that all sorts of fools would he be if he went to the Wailing Well. That evening, among some other notices, Mr. Beasley Robinson asked if all the maps had got the red ring marked on them. "Be particular," he said, "not to trespass inside it." Several voices, among them the sulky one of Stanley Judkins, said, "Why not, sir?" "Because not," said Mr. Beasley Robinson, "and if that isn't enough for you, I can't help it." He turned and spoke to Mr. Lambert in a low voice, and then said, "I'll tell you this much. We've been asked to warn scouts off that field. It's very good of the people to let us camp here at all, and the least we can do is to oblige them. I'm sure you'll agree to that." Everybody said yes, sir, except Stanley Judkins, who heard the matter obligingly bowed. Early in the afternoon the next day, the following dialogue was heard. "Wilcox, is your tent there?" "Wilcox, is all your tents there?" "No, sir, Judkins isn't. That boy is the most infernal nuisance ever invented." "Where do you suppose he is?" "I haven't an idea, sir." "Does anybody else know?" "Sir, I shouldn't wonder if he'd gone to the Wailing Well." "Is that? Pipsqueak? What's the Wailing Well?" Sir, it's that place in the field, but... well, sir, it's in a clump of trees in a rough field. Do you mean inside the Red Ring? Good heavens. What makes you think he's gone there? Why, he was terribly keen to know about it yesterday, and we were talking to a shepherd man, and he told us a lot about it, and advised us not to go there. But Judkins didn't believe him, and said he meant to go. Young ass, said Mr. Jones. Did he take anything with him? Yes, I think he took some rope and a can. We did tell him he'd be a fool to go. Little brute. What the deuce does he mean by pinching stores like that? Well, come along, you three, we must see after him. Why can't people keep the simplest orders? What was it the man told you? Now don't wait, let's have it as we go along. And off they started, Algernon and Wilfred talking rapidly, and the other two listening with growing concern. At last they reached their spur down overlooking the field, which the shepherd had spoken the day before. He commanded the place completely. The well inside the clump of bent and gnarled Scotch firs were plainly visible, and so too were the 4 tracks winding about among the thorns and rough growths. They were a wonderful day of shimmering heat. The sea looked like a floor of metal, and with no breath of wind. They was all exhausted when they got to the top and flung themselves down on the hot grass. Nothing to be seen of him yet, said Mr. Oak Jones, but we must stop here a bit. You are done up, not to speak of me. Keep a sharp lookout, he went on after a moment. I thought I saw the bushes stir. Yes, said Wilcox. So did I. Look, no, that can't be him. There's somebody through, putting their head up, isn't it? I thought it was, but I'm not sure. Silence for a moment, then... That's him, sure enough, said Wilcox. Getting over the hedge on the far side, don't you see? The shiny thing, the can you said he had. Oh, yes, it's him. He's making straight for the trees, said Wilfred. At this moment, Algernon, who had been sitting with all his might, or who had been staring with all his might, broke into a scream. What's that on the track? On all fours. Oh, it's the woman. Oh, don't let me look at her. Don't let it happen. And he rolled over, clutching at the grass and trying to bury his head in it. Stop that, said Mr. Oak Jones loudly, but with no use. Look here, he said. I must go down there. You stop here, Wilfred, and look after that boy. Wilcox, you run as hard as you can to the camp and get some help. They ran off, both of them. Wilfred was left alone with Algernon, and did his best to calm him, but indeed he was not much happier himself. From time to time he glanced down the hill and into the field. He saw Mr. Oak Jones drawing nearer at a swift pace, and then, to his great surprise, he saw him stop, look up, and round and about him, and turn quickly off at an angle. What could be the reason? He looked at the field, and there he saw a terrible figure, something in ragged black, with whitish patches breaking out of it. The head perched on a long thin neck, half hidden by a shapeless sort of blackened sunbonnet. The creature was waving thin arms in the direction of the rescuer who were approaching, as if to ward him off, and between the 2 fingers of the air it seemed to shake and shimmer as he had never seen it. And as he looked, he began himself to feel something of a waviness, confusion in his brain, which made him guess what might be the effect on someone within closer range of the influence. He looked away hastily, to see Stanley Judkins making his way pretty quickly towards the clump, in proper scout fashion, evidently picking his steps with care to avoid treading on snapping sticks or being caught by arms or brambles. Evidently, though he saw nothing, he suspected some sort of ambush and was trying to go noiselessly. Wilfred saw all that, and he saw more too. With a sudden and dreadful sinking at the heart, he caught sight of someone among the trees waiting, and again of someone, another of the hideous black figures, working slowly along the track from another side of the field, looking from side to side as the shepherd had described it. Worst of all, he saw a 4th, unmistakably a man this time, rising out of the bushes a few yards beyond the wretched Stanley, and painfully as it seemed, crawling into the track. On all sides, a miserable victim was cut off. Wilfred was at his wit's end. He rushed at Algernon and shook him. Get up, he said. Yell as loud as you can. Oh, if we've got a whistle. Algernon pulled himself together. There's one, he said. Wilcox, he must have dropped it. So one whistled, the other screamed. In the still air the sound carried. Stanley heard, He stopped, he turned round, and then indeed a cry were heard, more piercing and dreadful than any of the boars in the ilk could raise. It was too late. The crouched figure behind Stanley sprung him and caught him about the waist. The dreadful one that was standing, waving her arms, waved them again, but in exultation. The one that were lurking among the trees shuffled forward, and she too stretched out her arms as if to clutch at something coming her way. And the other, farthest off, quickened her pace and come on, nodding gleefully. The boys took it all in an instant of terrible silence, and hardly could they breathe as they watched the horrid struggle between the man and his victim. Stanley struck with his can, the only weapon he had. The rim of a broken black hat fell off the creature's head and showed a white skull with stains that might be wisps of air. I'm going to pause here because we're about to go into an ad break. And that's it started. So, we'll have a quick swallow of water before we move on. Oh. Hello. Good to see you here. Yeah. I don't know that I recognise you, do I? Biz Whiskers. We have. Yeah, bad timing. Well, they're trapped in the ads. But for anyone who's not, let's do a little bit of talk, shall we? I don't want to start an analysis of this story because it is, how'd you say? What's the words? It is just about to end, so we'll do our bit of analysis near there. But M.R. James is a writer, eh? A ghost stories more generally. What could we say about that? There's definitely a sort of air of upper class, sort of, well, not an air, a perspective of upper class sort of sight of this whole thing, really. You generally have some sort of gentleman who is the narrator or focus character of the story. I was saying perspective, you do see a lot of different tenses and persons. Some first, some third. Some accounts from documents and other ones from stranger sources. Even that one dialogue we had. It's all quite an unusual bit of a mix, but there's definitely a strong voice that runs through them. And it's definitely set pretty culturally in the sort of heartland of the British, of England, I should say. Academia. I mean, even this one, we've got Eton, which, while not a university, is one of the posh schools that tends to lead into either Oxford or Cambridge. We've had plenty of both Oxford and Cambridge, I think. It's interesting. I know that academics are a pretty common protagonist for this sort of story in the modern day. I wonder how much of that is down to James's influence. Yeah. There's a strange sort of focus on objects and places, some sort of settledness to the horror, which I think adds to the whole thing. I don't exactly feel coherent in like a sort of same world sort of thing, but there's definitely a theme to them. You do feel like, I do still to this day feel like a lot of them could be accounts, but I think I've come to the conclusion in the end that they are fiction. But they feel realistic, they feel like ghost stories, which is what they're called. The sort of things people tell as genuine. Anyway, our break's about to end, so I'll have another quick swallow of water. And that should be the end of the ad breaks. So, hello Fitz Whiskers. Good to have you. I don't believe I recognise your name, but at the same time you aren't coming up as a first time chatter, so perhaps I've forgotten you, in which case I do apologise. It's good to have you. We are just going through, as the title says of course, the ghost stories of M.R. James. Oh good, well, good to have you. It's not saying that you're a first time chatter, but I don't believe we've spoken before. It's a bit odd. But it's good to have you. If this is your first time, as you can tell I'm a rat and I read books generally on stream. We're going through the last of my collection of M.R. Jameses today. We've just finished we're just about to finish Wailing Well, I should say. We've got a couple more pages of it, and then we're going to do stories I've tried to write, which I suspect is Ah, well, I genuinely appreciate you to have you. Thank you for stopping by. Oh. Oh.
Fitzwhiskers _ has been bound to the library.
And thank you for the follow as well. I do appreciate it. It's always good to have more people there. But yeah. Of course, if you... Yeah. I never really know what to say because the format I use isn't really very good for interaction with people. But I genuinely appreciate it, and if you do have any thoughts or questions, do feel free to let me know. Yeah. Good to have you. Yeah. I'm waiting here for a moment to give you a chance to respond, but if you don't have any further to say, I will carry on with the story. But I do appreciate you stopping by to say something and to follow. Always love to have you. Oh? Well, feel free to let me know. I do try with the audio, but it is a little bit hit and miss. Always trying to get better. I'm going to take a moment to listen. I feel like I should be filling the air somehow. But I don't actually have a lot of practice with that, given that I mostly just read. What can we talk about? I haven't been much up to much lately in the library. Mam's still got me building more shelves, so nothing too interesting going on there. I haven't even really found any new books of late. I have to go out for a few more soon now, I think. Running out of short ones. Maybe I should dive into a novel here soon. I'll say a longer novel at least. Oop. The background noise stuff too. Something called voice. Okay. I didn't realise I had much background noise. I do. Well, I'll keep it in mind. Yeah. I appreciate it. I do have a voice gate on, but well, yeah, you know how it goes. Still, I appreciate it. I'll bear it in mind and give it a check out after stream. Thank you very kindly. Yeah. As always, I should say, if you do hear any issues with the audio, I'm always very happy to hear about it. I'll try my best, but you can only do so much, and everyone, well, I inevitably find that whenever you sort of do something, it sounds worse than you think about. But I do very much appreciate it. I'll give it a check. Yeah. That being said, I do just feel awkward sort of sitting there and not reading the book, given that's what I'm here to do. So I shall carry on with it. But I do appreciate that, and thank you again for the follow. Stanley struck again with his can, the only weapon he had. Thank you kindly. The only weapon he had. The rim of a broken black hat fell off the creature's head and showed a white skull with stains that might be wisps of hair. By this time, one of the women had reached the pair and were pulling at the rope that cord around Stanley's neck. Between them, they overpowered him in a moment. The awful screaming ceased, and then the three passed within the circle of the clump of firs. Yet for a moment it seemed as if rescue might come. Mr. Oak Jones, striding quickly along, suddenly stopped, turned, seemed to rub his eyes, and then started running towards the field. More. The boys glanced behind them and saw not only a troop of figures from the camp coming over the top of the next down, but the shepherd running up the slope of their own hill. They beckoned, they shouted, they ran a few yards towards him and then back again. He mended his pace. Once more the boys looked towards the field. There were nothing. Or were there something among the trees? Why were there a mist about the trees? Mr. Oak Jones had scrambled over the edge and were plunging through the bushes. The shepherd stood behind them, beside them, panting. They ran to him and clung to his arms. "They've got him, in the trees," was as much as they could say, over and over again. "Well, you mean to tell me you've gone in there after all I said to him yesterday?" "Hey, Nazca, good to have you. I'm doing pretty good. Appreciate your stopping by. If you're just stopping by now, we're most of the way through Wailing Well. Basically, Wailing Well, bad, troublesome school child has gone in there despite many warnings and is being carried off by several undead people. What? You mean to tell me you gone in there after I said to him yesterday? Poor young thing. Poor young thing." He would have said more, but other voices broke in. The rescuers from the camp had arrived. A few hasty words, and all was dashing down the hill. Very rude of me. I hope you're having a good day as well, Nazca. I don't think I said that. They just entered the field when they met Mr. Oak Jones. Over his shoulder hung the corpse of Stanley Judkins. He cut it from the branch to which he found it hanging, waving to and fro. There were not a drop of blood in the body. On the following day, Mr. Oak Jones sallied forth with an axe, with the expressed intention of cutting down every tree in the clump and of burning every bush in the field. He returned with a nasty cut on his leg and a broken axe helve. Not a spark of fire could he light, and on no single tree could he make the least impression. I have heard that the present population of the Wailing Well field consists of 3 women, a man, and a boy. The shock experienced by Algernon de Montmorency and Wilfred Pipsqueak was severe. Both of them left the camp at once, and the occurrence undoubtedly cast a gloom, if but a passing one, on those who remained. One of the first to recover his spirits were Judkins, me. Such, gentlemen, is the story of the career of Stanley Judkins, of a portion of the career of Arthur Wilcox. It has, I believe, never been told before. If it has a moral, that moral is, I trust, obvious. If it has none, I do not well know how to help it. That's the end of Wailing Well. That is an odd one. I do want to say, when it says that line there, second to last paragraph, one of the first to recover his spirits was Judkins, me. That's MR me, not ME me. It's in italics. I'm not exactly sure what that is meant to mean. I don't think it means to mean that the narrator is secretly Stanley Judkins, and it was Arthur Wilcox who went in there, but it might be that. Not entirely clear on that myself. But yeah. Let's do a little bit of a breakdown for the story before we go on to the last one. Which, as you can see, I had so many of these I had to stuff that one in sideways. But yeah. So obviously there's a couple of common points here. If someone tells you not to go somewhere, don't go there, obviously, you know. That's a pretty obvious one. I mean, it's literally Arbinger. It's a standard trope. I mean, it's kind of hard to narrow down any specific sin of Stanley Judkins, because he was just the caricature of a terrible kid who didn't do anything right. Obviously, I mean, this one's a little bit more light-hearted than some of the other ones. You know, you have the little crack about of five life-saving competitions, only 4 younger boys died. You know, and they stopped doing it because it was starting to get annoying. But yeah, it's odd, really. It started out quite light-hearted, but there was some pretty grim stuff near the end. A little bit of a tonal shift there. Yeah. Is there anything else to say? I think the framing of the sort of scout troop is a bit interesting, although I don't think there's too much that really comes of it. I mean, I guess you have the little stock recollections of competitions and things that Judkins did wrong, which is useful. But it feels like there was more potential in there that we never really explored much. Other than that, I don't think I've got too much else to say about it. I guess I could comment some on the nature of the Downs, which are sort of a staple location in a lot of stories out of the English canon. Downs being a pretty For those who don't know, downs are like a hilly area of land often used to raise sheep or the like. And, they're generally pretty wild and barren, so they're sort of a stock location in a lot of horror stories, but I mean, it doesn't exactly come up much in this other than being this sort of location of it. So yeah. Other than that, I don't think there's much to say, so I'll have one last quick drink and then we'll press on to our final one. Which I suspect is not a ghost story at all, but rather a commentary by the author, which I hope will finally and at last resolve the question of whether these is actually fictional ghost stories which he wrote, or if there's collected accounts of tales told to him by other people, which so many of them is framed as. But we'll find out. Stories I've tried to write. I have neither much experience nor much perseverance in the writing of stories. I'm thinking exclusively of ghost stories, for I never never cared to try any other kind. And it has amused me sometimes to think of the stories which have crossed my mind from time to time and never materialised properly. Never properly, but some of them I have actually written down, and they repose in a drawer somewhere. To borrow Sir Walter Scott's most frequent quotation, look on them again I dare not. They were not good enough. Yet some of them had ideas in them which refused to blossom in the surroundings I had devised for them, but had perhaps come up in other forms, in stories that did get so far as print. Let me recall them for the benefit, so the style of it, of somebody else. It was the story of a man travelling in a train in France. Facing him sat a typical Frenchwoman of mature years, with the usual moustache and very confirmed countenance. He had nothing to read but an antiquated novel he had brought for its binding, Madame de Lichtenstein it was called. Tired of looking out of the window and studying his VOD, he began drowsily turning the pages and paused at a conversation between two of the characters. They were discussing an acquaintance, a woman who lived in the largest house at miserly. The house was described, and here we were coming to a point, the mysterious disappearance of the woman's husband. Her name was mentioned, and my reader couldn't help thinking he knew it in some other connection. Just then the train stopped at a country station. A traveller with a start woke up from a doze, the book open in his hand. The woman opposite him got out, and on the label of her bag he read the name that had seemed to be in his novel. Well, he went on a tour, and from there he made excursions, and one of these took him, at lunchtime, to miserly. The hotel in the Grand Place faced a three-gabled house of some pretensions. Out of it come a well-dressed woman, whom he had seen before. Conversation with the waiter. Yes, the lady were a widow, or so it was believed. At any rate, nobody knew what had become of her husband. Here I think we broke down. Of course, there were no such conversation in the novel as the traveller thought he had read. Then there was quite a long one, about two undergraduates spending Christmas in a country house. I belonged to one of them. An uncle, next heir to the estate, lived near. Plausible, unlearned Roman priests, living with the uncle, makes himself agreeable to the young men. Dark walks home at night after dining with the uncle. Curious disturbances as they pass through the shrubberies. Strange shapeless tracks in the snow around the house. Observed in the mornings. Efforts to lure away the companion and isolate the proprietor, and get him to come out after dark. Ultimate defeat and death for the priest, upon whom the familiar, balked of another victim, turns. Also the story of two students at King's College, Cambridge, in the 16th century, who were, in fact, expelled thence for magical practices, and their nocturnal expedition to a witch at Fenstanton, and of how, at the turn in the Lulworth, on the Uddington Road, they met a company leading an unwilling figure whom they seemed to know. And of how, on arriving at Fenstanton, they learned of the witch's death, and what they saw seated upon her newly dug grave. These were some of the tales which got as far as the stage as being written down, at least in part. There was others that flitted across the mind from time to time, but never really took shape. A man, for instance, naturally a man with something on his mind, who, sitting in his study one evening, was startled by a slight sound, turned hastily, and saw a certain dead face looking out from between the window curtains. A dead face with living arms. He made a dash at the curtains and tore them apart. A pasteboard mask fell to the floor. There were no one there. And the eyes of the mask were but eyeholes. What would have he done about that? There was the touch on the shoulder that comes when you was walking home quickly homewards in the dark hours, full of anticipation of the warm room and bright fire. And when you pull up startled, what face or no face do you see? Similarly, when Mr. Badman had decided to settle the ash of Mr. Goodman and had picked out just the right thicket by the roadside from which to fire at him, how come it exactly that when Mr. Goodman and his unexpected friend actually did pass, they found Mr. Badman weltering in the road? You were able to tell them something of what he had found waiting for him, even beckoning to him in the thicket, enough to prevent them from looking into it themselves. There are possibilities here, but the labour of constructing the proper setting has been beyond me. There may be possibilities too in the Christmas cracker, if the right people pull it, and if the motto which they find inside has the right message on it. They will probably leave the party early, pleading indisposition. But very likely a previous engagement of long standing will be the more truthful excuse. In parentheses, many common objects may be made the vehicles of retribution, and where retribution is not called for, and malice. Be careful how you handle the packet you pick up in the carriage drive, particularly if it contains nail parings and air. Do not, in any case, bring it into the house. It may not be alone. That particular sentence there is followed by an ellipsis, the 3 dots, and then in brackets. Dots are believed by many writers of our day to be a good substitute for effective writing. They are certainly an easy one. Let's have a few more. And then there's just the 7 periods in a row in the brackets, which tickles me. Late on Monday night, a toad came into my study, and, though nothing has so far seemed to link itself with this appearance, I feel that it may not be quite prudent to brood over topics which may open the interior eye to the presence of more formidable visitors. Enough said. That's the end of the stories which I have tried to write. Nothing more there is in the pages. Well then, let's move over to our little to my little room, and we'll do our last conjectures onto the writings and nature of M.R. James. So first things first, it does seem at last that we have an answer to the question of if these is stories or if these is accounts, and it would seem they're stories, as he talks about the composing of them, which I suppose makes sense. There's definitely a lot to them. And they were written. I do hold that they could pass some of them for accounts of ghostly hauntings and ghost sightings. You're very welcome, Fitz. I do appreciate you coming by. Yeah. As I say, stories in the end are well written ones. And even there in his last little thing, he does a good little bit with some of the last moments. I particularly like the mask with the eyes in it. That's a clever one. The face of a dead man and eyes peering through it, but then the mask is of a dead man, but still the eyes there, and you don't see who it is. Very unsettling. And the little thicket at the side of the road. Plenty of little things. He's got a good mind for that, I think, as M.R. James. Small moments that are scary. And then from the way he described it, it feels like it builds his stories around them. Even that first one he described, the Frenchman in the train, I suspect it comes about from the idea of this prophetic vision rather than any particular thing. But he almost says as much. I will say as well, though, that the second story he proposes, the 2 students in the house, I think that's quite a good one. I think the problem of it, though, is that it doesn't work so well as a ghost story. Because you have the full setup there for a nice little murder mystery that's framed as a ghost story. You have the nearby uncle who's said to inherit the property if the young lad dies. The priest, who is clearly a co-conspirator, the tracks around the house, the attempts to lure out the young proprietor. Obviously, someone's trying to do it him, and obviously the most likely suspect is the uncle. A little bit of framing to make it seem like it's a spooky ghost story, and then, oh no, just common, brigandry and murder. We'll give it a little bit of something. There's even the sort of story James might cook up, although he'd obviously add some sort of ghostly twist to it to stick on theme, I suspect. But yeah, all told, I do think, I don't know, I just think I like James as a writer. I mean, the same way as yesterday I was reading Melville and Benito Serrano and I just wasn't getting on with it. I talked to Lamp about it because I sort of had the opinion that it wasn't a good book, and he refuted me and pointed me, there's sections of criticism in here, I don't generally go into them, in the library, and I looked it up, and there's a lot of good that is said about Benito Serrano, and a lot of people who rate it very highly. And I just didn't like it. Didn't agree with me. And I think in the same way that a lot of Melville's work doesn't agree with me, M.R. James in particular does. He doesn't write stories to have these sort of great overarching themes. They're not, you know, I mean, lots of them have things to say, obviously, and they're sort of set in a time, and I think they're very interesting in sort of in the way that they are set in a period and culture, which I don't think is intentional. I think it's just the way that M.R. James himself sort of lived and thought. But fundamentally, they're written to be fun. They're written to be entertaining stories, which I think does a lot for them. I'm not exactly made up my mind yet. I've got a few that I haven't read yet. I've got a couple of Dickens. I've got some more twist. Basically, the choice is just going to come down to whether I do a novel in a couple of sittings, or if I work through some more of the short stories. Although I'm running quite low on the short stories. Other than, what have I got left? Actually, I think the only ones I've got left in are the wilds that I still have to do. So yeah, I guess it will probably be some sort of novel. Well, we got some Hemingway and we got some Dickens. A few scattered bits and bobs. Yeah. If you've got any preference, I can show you around the library, and you can. Which I've got no mind. Yeah, let's give it a run over, shall we? Quick run through the library. So down here we've got Mr. Arrington's Confessions, which we haven't touched. We've got For Whom the Bell Tolls. That's a new one we haven't done. Over here, what have we got? Anything new? Done all that. Yeah, nothing new here. Oh, we haven't done. We got The Sign of the Four by Arthur Conan Doyle. That's a little mystery. We could do that. Mr. Arrington's Confession we said. Of these, I haven't done The Red Badge of Courage or The Member of the Wedding Party. Yeah, The Member of the Wedding. How's he yet to do? All this we've done. Yeah, we got the Red Oscar Wilde's here. They're new. We're not reading that one. Death in Venice. We got Coming Up for Air by Orwell. Then we got Oliver Twist and Hard Times by Charles Dickens. We're still reading Emma on Tuesday, specifically for our Torrid Tuesdays. We got Cherie by Colette, My Life by Anton Chekhov, and that's all the ones we haven't done. I'll also probably need to start going out in the library in a couple of days and getting some more, just because it's always good to have, you know, a couple of little short ones to do just on days when you're not feeling up to anything too grand. I don't think I've ever read them. I will tell you, I'm limited in what I can read, given the first, copyright laws mean that you're sort of limited in how modern things are. Crazy how long things stay in copyright. And also, nothing I have available to me in the library is more recent than 1957. So, if he's later than that, I probably can't get a hold of him. But yeah, I can't say that I've ever read any of his. So. Yeah. It's going to get worse as well, because right now, anything that is prior to, I think, 1962, 63 is technically legal. Again, I'm stuck at 57 for complicated reasons. But the reason it's that at that date is because there was a law passed then in the United States where they changed the existing copyright law from less time than it is then to the death of the author and then 80 years afterwards, which seems crazy to me, you know? Like, the idea is, of course, that the family holds on the rights, and you can understand wanting the family to have something, but 80 years past the death of the author seems mad. Still, it is what it is. But yeah. Well, I don't know. It's the mouse, people tell me. It's, you know, I'm sure But yeah, still, there's plenty to go from. I've got lots of little classics here. I do have an eye on some other things. There's some, what have we got? I know that I've got an eye on some. Actually, there's some other. There's another author called James who I was looking at because I thought it was more M.R. James, but it's a different James who does ghost stories as well. Got an eye on him. There's some. I've got a few little things I've got an eye on. Like, if none of those appeal, I can try and look for something else, or if any of them stand out to you, I'm literally like, if you have a preference, I'm happy to take the choice based on that because I've got none. But other than that, we'll just pick something. We get by. We'll read it all in the end. It's the idea, at least. Yeah. That being said, yeah. But unless anyone has a particular book they would like me to either read out of those ones or keep an eye out for, I think we'll call it there, given that we're just about done for the day. I should braid out. It's polite, isn't it? Let's see who's live. Plague's live, and she's doing Phasmophobia, so that's a pretty fitting one. Ghost to Ghost. There. Well, again, if you do have a preference for anything, let me know. You can shoot me a message on Twitch or on Twitter, and I'll keep an eye out for it. I can't promise I can get anything because I am literally going off of books that I find. But if there's a book from prior to 1957 that you have an interest in, and that's first publication 1957 to be clear, obviously later editions will come out. But yeah, feel free to let me know. I'm always happy to take requests. I've got no strong preference either way. Yeah. We're going to raid out now into my friend Plague, who is playing Phasmophobia, which seems fairly fitting. Yeah. Other than that, I don't think I've got much else to say. Thank you everyone for stopping by, I do appreciate it. As always, I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, night, evening, whatever time it is for you. And I very much appreciate you stopping by. And as always, ta-ra.